It's the state of the dungeon! It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the state of the dungeon. I'm Rob, and I will be going over the events of the games for April 2nd, 2020 and April 16th, 2020. Both sessions were held remotely due to the coronavirus lockdown, so we were playing over Roll20. I, in both of these games, was playing as Gelhard through varying levels of effectiveness. So, the first session, we had returned to Waterdeep. And while in Waterdeep, there's certainly always some things to do. The prior session had us doing the most with running around and getting information about what was to come. Talking to, for instance, various members of our guild and talking to VIPs about just general information about what we could learn about the cult and how to effectively progress. We kind of hit the end of the road that we were on after we had finished off the Black Worm Speaker of the Cult of the Dragon and stopped that avenue of treasure from reaching them at the Well of Dragons. So, we set things into motion. We were made aware that there was a council that was forming that we were invited to go to since we had given the cult a black eye, and that we were expected to be in attendance for this. This was going to be a gathering of the Lord's Alliance and those influential to them. So this is one of those things with a lot of people with fancy names that we were going to have to show up to. This was the time when I chose to go with Galhard instead of Corbrecht. At any rate, events opened as we were taking care of our own things. There was a bit of time between the opening of play and the actual council meeting, although we had gone through about a week in town. A few things had happened for individuals, what they were interested in, the purchasing of magical items and things like that. But the thing that everybody noticed was at one point there was a wave of magical energy that coursed over the entirety of the town. Everything was stopped in their tracks momentarily, not held magically, but by the import of the magic that was unleashed. Even all the animals and things were completely silent for a moment. This seemed like it was a pretty big deal, and quite honestly, with all the events that are going on, it was hard to believe that a cult that was hell-bent on bringing forth their dragon goddess into the world might be behind one of these massive pulses of energy, and that kind of thing to be looked into. That's certainly what Gelhard thought. So he immediately went to a temple. With his point of view, religious orders can solve most things. So he went to the Temple of Timora, his personal patron. Tried to question the people there about the nature of the magical wave that had washed over everything, and they had no answer. No clue, nothing. Gelhard was disgusted that they weren't even the least bit curious in this. So he went over to the Temple of Agma, the god of secrets and revelation. And turns out they were a lot more into things like that. So Galhard asked to talk to the senior priest and asked him to find out what had just happened. And he thought it was a good idea. So he went off and he went and did a commune spell. Galhard was polite and read the literature and sat around waiting. When he finally came out, he revealed that the source of the power was a magical artifact called the Drakenhorn, and that had been sounded, which generally didn't mean good things. He couldn't be more specific, but he directed Galhard to go and talk to the priests of Bahamut, who have a temple in the high quarters, the nobles area. Galhard didn't know how to get there. Waterdeep is a vast city, and Galhard is not used to this press of civilization around him. When he found out there was a scribe who knew how to get there, however, he grabbed the scribe, tucked him under his arm, and ran under the direction of the scribe to get to this place as quickly as possible, because he thought the very legions of hell could be snapping at his heels any moment. So he gets to the gate, the guard gives him guff, threatens to throw him in jail when Galhard is a little less than polite and was basically kidnapping a scribe. So eventually they offered to take Galhard, so Galhard put the scribe down and brought him to the Temple of Bahamut, where he talked to a paladin in the service of Bahamut. And he said he knew a little bit about the Drakenhorn, but took him to a noble lady who was a scholar about dragon-related artifacts. And she told him quite a bit about it, that it was used to summon the dragons of evil for great doings in the dragon goddess Tiamat's name. That all beings could feel it to a certain extent. Gold dragons could feel it, and they weren't compelled to follow, but they knew it meant bad things were coming. And chromatic dragons were at least compelled to pay attention, if not actually summoned to the site. Although most of them would be summoned to the site. So, that was bad news. And she was going to be a guest at the council meeting anyhow, so Galhard went back to the hall, and he talked to the group about what he had discovered. Which is a pretty good bit of investigative reporting for a barbarian, I must say. Kythion was moved to cast a spell himself where he could commune and, with contact of the plane, find answers to questions, such as, where will the first dragon, or when will the first dragon be summoned? His answer was rather generous, so it tells him that he has the favor of, or this quest has the favor of the upper deity he contacted. The response was, the first dragon will be a red dragon that will arrive at the Well of the Dragons tomorrow. Which means, A, there was a dragon already out there. B, that the horn is at the Well of the Dragons. C, that things are moving quickly. So, we already had some precious intel about this. We weren't ready to go and attack the Well of the Dragons or anything at this point, but we at least knew where it had been sounded, when, and we had a pretty good idea by who, since, well, Resmer was already bringing things to the Well of the Dragon on course with the goings-on of her cabal, so clearly that was the group, and it was probably impelled by her death that they decided to do this. So, we didn't have anything else to do, so we waited until the council meeting started. We got a big how do you do by a lot of VIPs that nobody in the group cared about. Quite honestly, there were a lot of really impressive names, and they all had titles, and they all had a reason for being there, representing either one of the factions, like the Emerald Enclave, or the Harpers. They had representatives, but most of these people were the rulers of the various lands around the Sword Coast. And many of them were just in attendance to see what kind of crap was coming down. For instance, Lord Neverember, who is the titular overseer of Neverwinter, was the lead for the Lord's Alliance. And he was interested in seeing us succeed, getting whatever help. He pledged that we would, if we worked in the name of the Lord's Alliance, an offer that we eventually accepted, that we would have their backing. They would be able to give us resources and access to things that we wouldn't get in other ways. We would have their sanction to operate within any civilized areas up and down the Sword Coast, with the express purpose for defeating this cult of the dragon and stopping them from summoning Tiamat. For the most part, we were pretty okay with that. We had a little bit of umbrage from the Emerald Enclave, who weren't happy with us having at some point in our career maybe or maybe not destroying a bunch of dragon eggs, which he would have rather seen us use for leverage against the dragons. But we didn't, because honestly, they weren't there. That wasn't their call. Our characters made it. Galhard wasn't there, so I couldn't say anything to that. But we eventually got to the point where we told everybody what we had done. And they were pretty happy that Resmer was stopped. I don't think we told them about the mask that we were still in possession of. At least we didn't want that to become common knowledge, that we still had that mask. But we made everything clear what we were doing. A couple people were very pleased with us. One was an old, crippled paladin who was presiding over Daggerdale and spoke for them, but he also had very close ties to Cormyr and wanted it made clear that Cormyr had a staked interest in us succeeding as well, having no love for dragons. Again, most of our characters had never been to Cormyr or even heard a great deal about it, so the revelation really lost its impact on a group of adventurers who weren't really prepared to be impressed by a lot of the pageantry. Our characters aren't nobles, and as adventurers, we kind of thumb our nose at their structure and everything, so yeah, a lot of those names didn't really hit us much. Again. So the meeting went on. We were more interested in talking. The paladin, of course, thanked us for what we did, and after meeting, he kind of told us, just so you know, there's been some problems. First of all, there happens to be a noble son of that rather grumpy fellow who may be taking up with the Cult of the Dragon. Also, out by Daggerdale, the green dragons are causing some problems. Might be because the green dragon worm speaker's out there? We're not sure, but it's something you might look into. And considering we haven't hit our quota of killing dragons lately, we may end up doing that, but that's not our first priority. The things that were laid before us were basically twofold. Number one, they knew the location of Verum the White, the worm speaker for the white dragons. The one who didn't have a dragon buddy. Possibly because he might not have his share of the mask. He may be looking for it. The clue that we had was that he went off looking at a divination artifact, trying to do something. Again, we suspect it's to try to find the mask. That was one thing we could do. The other thing was to go and find a wizard of Luskan, one of their arcane brotherhood who rules the city, and rescue her. She was last seen in the Sea of Moving Ice. And that's not a great place, especially considering it's haunted by a huge white dragon, Aramthor, something like that. We probably have to go and rescue her, too. She's supposedly a great expert on the Drakenhorn and could tell us even more information that might help us out. We heard that. Our group discussed briefly and decided that we really wanted to chop the head off of this beast as quickly as possible, so we'd go after the white. We also ended up talking to, this is in the next session, in April 16th, we talked to Lael Silverhand, powerful wizard, one of the chosen of Mystra, and founder of the Harpers, and a lot of stuff, big titles. Again, a lot of our players who aren't as in depth in Forgotten Realms are kind of like, okay, but she's a big name. She's very powerful, and she's a key player. She told us that right now they're kind of suspecting Lord Neverember of smuggling out gold out of Waterdeep for some purpose. Considering we've been spending a lot of time dealing with people smuggling ill-gotten gains, this is suspicious. But realistically, we don't have the group that can go in and do any investigation. None of our players who have rogues are playing the rogues at this time. So it's not going to happen. We averred. We just told her we can't do it. This is the kind of thing that could be incredibly embarrassing if we fail, and we don't have the kind of people who are prone to succeed in something like that. Galhard, do subtlety? If Corbrecht had been along, it wouldn't have been so much of a deal. He does have invisibility and a pretty good head on his shoulders, but yeah, that wasn't going to work. And we were all, well, at least Galhard, was geased into not giving up that information. So he can't talk about it. So, excuse me. Our group, again, decided to go after Fair of the White, which we found out that he is in a place. Sorry, this is on the 30th of April. We found out that he is at Borskir Bridge, which is the closest town to the tomb where the artifact we're looking for is, or divination relic. that was apparently drawing Verum the White. So after we talked to her, to Laryl, we went back to Neverember, who directed us to the Seneschal of Waterdeep, who is a very, very, very busy man. And we asked him to set up a teleportation circle so that we could go to Borskir Bridge, or as close as possible. And he arranged it. Got a young wizard who apparently has mastered that level of mastered teleport, actually, because I didn't think there was a circle where we were going, to take us there, which he did. It was not a fun trip. It hurt. Nobody enjoyed that particular trip, but oh yeah, I forgot. We also talked to Leosin for more information about Verum the White. We pegged him for all the details we could get. He's a shield dwarf, or a gold dwarf, who dresses in purple robes. And we couldn't find out a great deal else beyond that. He might be a transmuter, but he hasn't really demonstrated anything other than throwing fireballs around, so yay. So we made it to Borskir Bridge. We talked to the locals a little to find out that, yes, this dwarf had arrived in this area and he had moved off into the hills looking for a tomb. The wizard whose tomb it was known to have this pool of scrying that could be used to get all kinds of information, which, again, kind of fit our theory on who and why this was, why this was going on. So we got some directions and headed off. The journey itself, not terribly exciting. We got to the tomb fairly quickly. We marched at a forced march, so we got there extra quick. But clearly we had missed our quarry. He was already gone. There were signs that he had been there in the ruins, but they had lost their horses. Apparently they had been scared to the point where they had ripped out of their moorings and ran off. So we were kind of left with a sense of, well, might as well go in and see what we can find out. So we went into the tomb itself. There were two big statues that presented us with a warning about heeding their warnings. We went in, and in the very first room that we came to, we found a large mural on the ground of a big chimera fighting this warrior, and several rooms leading out that we could go throughout. One of them was bulging outward and looked awfully suspicious. Another one just had the word safe written on it with no other explanation. And then there was a hallway leading out. So we checked the door that was written safe. As we were doing that, the chimera ripped itself off of the floor and started attacking us, this big tile, two-dimensional chimera. Well, it jumped up onto a ledge in the room and breathed fire at us, which wasn't fun. It was also out of melee combat, so most of the fun that Galahad could do was gone. So the group attacked it as best they could. Of course, Glim chucked his hammers with effect. A variety of spells were cast. Galahad threw an axe. And the creature eventually came down. And again, more beatings. It was a tough foe because it could turn sideways and be very difficult to hit, which it used to dodge an attack by Kytheon. Eventually, Galahad hooked it with his magical axe, and it broke. So, nothing ventured, nothing gained. No treasure to be won there. We opened up the safe door and found out that it led to a well, which still had water in it. Clear drinking water. Excellent. And then we went back to the hallway, which is a ramp that was descending. We started going down it when, rogues, audible click, a large boulder made out of compressed bone, just a lot of bodies all crammed together, started rolling down the corridor. It was very tall. Galahad could not stop it by himself. It looked like it weighed quite a bit. So rather than watching Kytheon get crushed by this thing, Galahad tackled him, got him out of the worst of the danger, and took the brunt of the impact on himself as the thing rolled by them. Eventually, it just kind of fell apart as it went, so it just left bits of bone and fragments all over the floor. But we got through it without much difficulty and descended down into the next chamber. This particular room was covered with tapestries on all the walls, and other than that, there wasn't a great... There were two doors, a double door and a single door leading out of it. We looked through the various tapestries and noticed several of them were different. Most of them were noble houses of the surrounding area. A couple of them actually showed instructions on a particular pattern of movements one would have to make to go through the double doors, showing a gesture of reverence and humility. So, Kytheon did that, walked through, and made it through the door. We all repeated and went in. In the next room, there was a large statue of this wizard, who demanded tribute to be allowed to go through into the next room. Galahad gave up his masterwork greatsword, one of his better weapons. The only thing he has finer is a magical battle axe, so he gave this up. It was acknowledged that it was a kingly offer, and he was allowed to go through. Everybody offered something. The smallest was a single axe offered up by Lydia, but all of them were accepted and allowed us to go through. So apparently you didn't have to donate very much, which the DM later revealed to us with a chortle. Honestly, though, Galahad would have valued the cup more than the sword, too, because he was perfectly willing to leave the sword behind on the next body of somebody that he beat. It's just the way he is. So they go through into the next room to reveal a table, chairs, and a bunch of devils gambling. They were stuck, bound into this chamber to shred anybody who came up through the door we didn't come up. Interesting. They didn't bother us because they weren't told to bother us. We could freely walk out the other door out of the room. They were actually kind of chatty. Nothing wrong with that. We didn't have any inherent problem with them. And we didn't think that we really needed to attack them and drain our resources. We might have been able to beat them. Probably could have beaten them. But it probably also would have, certainly would have inflicted some damage on us. Probably wasn't worth it. So we went out the next door. And that is as far as my notes go. So, we had one combat encounter, a couple of riddles, and a small role-playing opportunity in this tomb so far. We still have not found the pool, where hopefully we will find the secrets to where the White Worm Speaker is heading, so that we can go and catch up. At one point in the trip to the tomb, we did see a group of 4 humanoids who were moving at haste, on foot, in a direction that we weren't going. I couldn't help at the time but think, hey, I bet that's the people we're going after, but we didn't stop them or interfere because might not have been. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, and we did demonstrate that we are able to run in a dungeon and do tactical combat over Roll20, which was nice. Greg had all those maps laid out for us, and it worked out quite well. So we have no fears about proceeding forward, and hopefully to more and fun adventures. So next time we'll definitely have a State of the Dungeon after the session, and my head will hopefully be a bit clearer. So, thank you, and we will see you next time here in the Dungeon of Love. Thank you. Farewell.